Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've been talking about service and what it's like to obey God's call to serve His children. In this segment, we'll get to meet someone who answered God's call to serve in a leprosy colony in China for several years. Today, she continues to serve God as a pastor's wife, a mother, and a child and adolescent mental health therapist in Maryland. But she continues to hold the lessons God showed her in Asia close to her heart. Let's welcome to Hope at Night, Grace Lee. Grace, tell us what it's like growing up.
So I was born to Korean American immigrants in New York City. They moved down to North Carolina. That's where I grew up. And growing up, it was very much, your typical Asian American childhood. Got to push the academics, got to do
academic pressure. Right?
Yes, got to do really well in all these things, and that's the life that I knew, and that's the life that my sisters and I, were expected to live. And basically, by the time I was my junior year in high school, my greatest dream was going to a good university, to get a good job, to make money, to spend it on myself. I mean, this was my dream.
How'd you go from that into volunteering at a leper colony?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but to make it short, my third year in high school, I had my first experience with Jesus. My parents had religiously taken me to church, and they were Christians, but Jesus wasn't real in my life. And it was not until then that I had my first encounter with Jesus Christ. And from that, my perspective started to slowly change. And going to university, I went into social work, which is not the typical thing to do. And then God gave me a call to service to do student missions overseas in Southeast Asia. And all these things led up. So after my master's, God opened doors for me to go to Korea. And then I met some friends there who were doing missions in China. And that's how I got, I had never heard about leprosy before. I thought it was something that was only in ancient times or things in the Bible. But there's hundreds of leprosy villages all over.
What was your family's reaction when you told them, I'm going to be working in a leper colony?
So thankfully, they had been slowly working up to that point. They had seen that my perspectives had changed from university, and that I wanted to serve in different ways. And so I'm very thankful for Christian parents who said, we're going to pray for you and we support you to do that. So I'm very thankful for them.
Let me ask you a question. What are the dynamics of a leper colony? What takes place there? What are the social dynamics? What's it like interacting with people and then their connection with the outside world?
So the people who live there, they're primarily now elderly because before the treatment was developed several decades ago, there wasn't any treatment. And they're ostracized by society. And then their own families also disowned them. So they were disowned by their family, society, and then the government would make them live in separate places because of fear of contamination, et cetera. And so they have this very close-knit group of people because they had to kind of take care of each other.
What was it like interacting with them?
So that's one of the things that really surprised me because they're the most open and loving people you'll ever meet. And I was just so overwhelmed by that. Just the love that they showed me. I really felt like I didn't do that much, but they're the ones that showed me so much love.
When it came to interacting with them, was there ever a fear you could get leprosy?
Sure. Before I went, I was like, I looked at pictures, I was doing some research, and the pictures are different than when you meet them in real life. But actually, about 95% of the world's population is actually immune to getting leprosy. But people think it was like COVID-19. You sneeze or you shake someone's hand, you could get it. But it's actually very difficult to get it.
Grace, for those that may not know, could you tell us what exactly is leprosy? At least the colonies you worked with, what kind of leprosy did they suffer with? Because there's multiple kinds of leprosy.
Sure. I mean, it was, leprosy is a bacteria, but they were all treated for it. So I don't know the specific types, but they were all treated decades ago. And so the people living there now are the ones that don't have any family to go back to. And so they are primarily elderly
What
that are
does
living there.
what does leprosy do to the body?
It mainly affects your nervous system. So different parts of the body are not able, you cannot feel, have different sensations. And so it's not the leprosy itself that causes like fingers to get lost or toes to come off. It's actually the injuries that causes infections, etc. Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes they're unaware that they've been injured. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And so it's not treated, it becomes infected and then gangrene or whatever, and then wow.
Yes.
When you came into that leprosy colony, was there, what were the feelings going through your mind and heart? And just to be very frank, were you surprised? Were you shocked? Were you in your mind like thinking, what am I doing here? What was going through your mind?
I think initially before I went there, I was kind of wondering, kind of worried. But actually, when I got there and I met the people, we called them grandmas and grandpas, they were very cute and very loving and just the most, joy-filled people that you've met. And so I was very taken aback by that. And they welcomed me and the other volunteers as part of their family.
What realizations did you have when you were working at that leper colony?
Oh, wow. So many. First, I have a lot to be thankful for. I have so much to be thankful for. But also, kind of on a deeper level, I realized, wow, these people, they've had leprosy. They've been affected, so they can't feel in different parts of their body. But I realized, wow, I'm okay on the outside, but inside, because of selfishness, when I'm just thinking of myself, I'm numb. I'm numb to people's pain. I was so unhappy when I was just living just for myself.
Wow.
And so I think that's one of the biggest things I realized. And it made me realize, wow, no matter where God puts me, I hope he can help me see the need around me and not to be focused only on myself.
You ever heard of the book, The Gift of Pain?
Yes, I love that book. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
And the author talks about leprosy, and he describes an incident, I believe it was in India, where a man was working on his car, the hood was open, he had leprosy, and he cut himself on part of the engine. And as he continued to work on the engine, he was unaware that he was actually bleeding nonstop. And the author was pointing out that sometimes that discomfort is actually for our own good. It's needed. And yet these people who were suffering from leprosy couldn't even feel that pain of the injury, right? What would you say is one memory that is so special to you from your time working at that leprosy colony?
Well, there's so many memories, but I think it's the relationships. Some of the grandmas and grandpas I got really close with, and I just felt like, we're part of the same family. And that's what I really enjoyed about this. It wasn't just going in, once a month, just saying hi, but we were living together like family and, taking care of people's basic needs. Like sometimes some people needed help eating or taking a bath or cleaning, doing basic everyday things. But some of the grandmas and grandpas, we had some special moments. And then when I felt like really we're family now.
It's really interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking, the people that give their lives to mission service, people who go out to the Philippines to go through storm and through danger to get people to the hospitals, or people go live in leprosy colonies I think, man, these people are crazy people. But I want to say something. You guys are as normal as they come. Mm-hmm. I want to know what in the world drives you guys. What drove you guys to make these sacrifices, to give up life and ambition and part of your future to go down these paths to minister to those in need? What would cause you to do something like that? Andrew, you want to start?
Yeah, for me, it's just a realization that we have more to live for. We have more to give. And for a lot of people, they don't have that hope. And so being able to share that hope is really meaningful for me as a Christian, and just being a blessing in general.
The ironic thing is when we do, we are the ones that are actually blessed so much, and there's actually real joy that comes from that. So when I talk about my time in China, that was like the best time ever and the most joy-filled time, and I would go back in a heartbeat.
Wow. It makes me think about Jesus as the missionary who left heaven to come to this world, and thank you guys for following in his footsteps. I've been really impressed and just blown away by just the way that God has used you and still using you guys. I've got to ask you one more question. Do you have any final words for our viewers tonight? Grace, let's start with you.
Life with Jesus is amazing. And I just would want to encourage everyone, just experience Christ's love and share that love. And that's the way to have true joy while we serve and reach out to others.
Wow. How about you?
For me, I would say just follow the little voice in your head, God's voice, of course, saying, reach out to this person, do something nice for this person, or, be my hands and feet for these people, because you can make a huge difference that way.
That's right. I was actually looking at some research not too long ago that described that the most generous people are the most happiest people in our world. The generosity leads to happiness when we give to others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's time to go to our break, but when we come back, we'll get to hear some questions from our live audience for our guest tonight. So don't go away. Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've heard some inspiring stories from a missionary pilot in the far-flung areas of the Philippines and a missionary to a leprosy colony in China. I'd like to turn to our live in-studio audience and see what questions they have for our guest tonight. We have any questions here? All right, let's go to our first question right over here.
Hi, this is more specifically geared towards Andrew. Were there any times where you questioned whether or not you should continue your missionary work, especially like after the woman went missing in the plane?
That's a really good question. I will admit it's fluctuated some. I've never decided not to continue with service, but there's been those doubts have definitely come into my mind where it's overwhelmingly scary at times. Kind of my response to that has been to rely on God, to turn to God and say, Lord, here's my fear. I am unable to continue moving with this fear on my shoulders. Please take that from me and help me process it.
Well, that's really incredible. The fact that you encounter these struggles makes you completely human, by the way. Who wouldn't feel those struggles after what happened?
Yeah.
And how you've been processing through that, and it's led to an even greater dependence upon God.
And it's a journey. It's not like you make a decision to follow, one step. It's one step in front of the other instead of accepting everything all at once. The Lord provides opportunities as you're moving forward. He builds your faith as that time progresses, and so at the end of it, you're more prepared for the challenges ahead because you've relied on God to that point.
Andrew, as the days begin to pass by and there was no word of her rescue, there was nothing coming back from the news or from the Navy or any of the other rescue pilots, day after day passed. What helped you process through that time? So
kind of coming out of realizing, that every day it was during that first week and a half, it was like, tomorrow we'll find them. Tomorrow we're gonna be able to get some good news. And then it started being past the time. I did some research on how long you could survive at sea without, good medical or good survival equipment. And so in my mind, I was processing, what's the chance of them being alive? I didn't have a lot of answers. And kind of going past that week and a half, I started to realize that chances of survival were pretty slim.
Right.
And I started having to accept that. And of course, it was incredibly painful, just having to accept that. And at the same time, continue moving forward without resolution to those questions. you basically just have to say, Lord,
Right.
I'm unable to go forward. You need to help me.
And that's what happens, and that is the only thing you can do, and Jesus understands that, right? He walks with us when we can't walk anymore.
And honestly, after that point, there was some mild depression that set in, some anxiety. I was more irritable. I was, all these different things that come as a part of grief. I experienced all of those. And I think the biggest thing that helped me out of that was a good spiritual life. Of course, it was stretched. It was there was some back and forth with that specifically, but also having a good community of people that you can surround yourself with in a time of tragedy and grief.
Right. Wow. Thank you for sharing. I know it's not easy.
Yeah.
Do we have a second question? Right over there.
For both of you, how do you continue your work and not get discouraged when you see so much suffering firsthand?
I think for me, every time I'm able to see somebody in a suffering situation, for me, I'm able to help tangibly. I'm able to get them to better medical care. I'm able to help them physically. And to see the family members, even if that specific patient can't respond, just seeing the family members so thankful for the help that I'm able to provide, that's what makes it worthwhile for me personally.
I think one of the things is I realized that this individual, like they're not supposed to be here, and then there's hope. There's hope for something better, and seeing what I can do, whether in therapy or helping people like with wound treatment, etc. But realizing that God loves and cares for this person, I think it's a huge part of not letting just seeing the suffering and just staying there, but realizing this person has hope and God is in control and He can get them to a better place. It has really helped me.
And it seems that God gives an added measure of grace to be able to deal with those struggles, to confront death,
Yes.
to see the discouragement and realize you're there for a reason. We have a third question right over there.
As a sailor and navigator, I'm interested in what was your most challenging flight from point A to point B, and how do you overcome any difficulties?
That's an awesome question. There's a couple that come to mind. The weather is probably the biggest factor in the aviation side of things over in the Philippines. It's a lot of tropical storms. We actually had a typhoon come through last December, and our runway and several other runways started to flood, and they were very muddy. So just navigating through the thunderstorms and the bad weather were really difficult. But when you ask that question, kind of more on the emotional side of things, was the hardest flight for me was after I lost Janelle in the helicopter accident. I'm a fixed wing pilot, so I don't have as much to do with the helicopters, but getting back in the airplane and looking for them in the search and rescue efforts, that was probably my hardest moment as a pilot, because what can you do? You're just looking, and
it's that internal storm.
It's that internal storm,
Right.
I don't know how to put it in words, but it's very emotionally taxing and difficult to keep going.
Andrew, when you're working at your station, are you just on call? You get a call on the radio, and it's just boom, it's time to take off at that moment. How does that work when you get like an emergency call?
That's a good question. For me, it's more of a process where the sending medical facility will call our operation and say, hey, we've got a medevac patient. Could you come fly them? And so in the process of that, we'll notify the nurse and we'll get our equipment together. The airplane's usually already ready for most of the areas we fly. But we'll fly to the destination island as quickly as we can. We have about a half-hour delay before we're a half-hour preparation time, and then as soon as we can, we're airborne and going to going to help people.
You just can't run to the plane and just take off. There's a prep time.
There is a prep time.
Checking everything.
Yeah.
You have a checklist.
You have to do a complete walk around and to make sure that you have the adequate fuel, the oil. Different islands are different distances. So you need different fuel amounts for each island.
How many other missionary pilots are part of your station?
So we've got 4 different bases around the Philippines, and where I'm at right now, we've got a little bit of a rotation going where we have, there's 3 of us based there right now, and more coming this fall. So the Lord's really blessed in the staffing side of things, but basically through September through later May, I was basically the pilot on call. I would be the one to fly.
Wow.
So
I'm sure the needs are great.
yeah, for sure.
Wow. You have another question? Right over there.
Hi, this question's for Andrew. I first want to say I'm very sorry for what happened.
Thank you.
This question is really kind of going back to how you were answering at the first one. When you found out, like, you're missing your girlfriend and she was gone for about 6 months, or even like at the beginning of that time, did you ever blame God for what happened or started to hate him? If so, like, how did you cope with that and how did you start to forgive him?
That's an excellent question. I'm sure a lot of people have had to deal with that. How can a just God allow bad things to happen? For me, I've kind of seen God leading to this point. I've seen him working in my life specifically and calling me to mission aviation. So yes, I have my doubts, but I've intentionally never directed those at God. I've never been angry at God because I've seen that there's there's good and evil. As I don't know how many of you have read the story in the Bible of Job. God didn't cause all these bad things to happen to Job, but he allowed them for a purpose. And it's easy to kind of, get your mind stuck on, hey, God's at fault. Why did God allow this? And kind of studying the story of Job, it's become more real to me, saying, no, there's this battle between good and evil. And for me, I've decided that God is fair, God is just. Bad things do happen, but God can bring good out of it. And so, to answer the question honestly, I've chosen not to question God in this. I've questioned the situation a lot of times. I've asked God, why her? But I've never been angry at God specifically for allowing this to happen, because yes, he allowed it, but I can tell that there's some good going to come out of this.
Right. We have an episode where we have tackled this very heartfelt question of like, God, if you're so good, why in the world do bad things happen to good people? I mean, this is a question that's confronted pastors and preachers and philosophers and theologians. It's the number one question asked of Christian apologists is like, if God is so good, why in the world is it so terrible here?
Yeah.
The one who has all power and all authority and, is all loving, yet we're in a fallen world where tragedy and heartbreak and pain exist. But there are responses that God gives to us, right? And part of eternity is understanding, his purposes and plans through it all.
Yeah.
In spite of what took place, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So, Grace, with this question that was just asked, you're living on a leper colony, and these people had these diseases come upon them. Did you find bitterness among them? Were they angry, upset at God or the heavens?
So most of them were not, before they learned about Jesus, like they were not Christians when they contracted leprosy. I think the bitterness that I saw was sometimes geared toward people who had mistreated them, sometimes family members, wow. Sometimes people who had like abandoned them or were very, very like abusive to them, who were not family members because of this disease. But what I saw was really amazing. Multiple people, after they met Jesus, they were able to forgive those people like who had treated them so badly. Yeah. And of course, they weren't saying what those people did was right or justify it in any way, but they were able to let go of that bitterness toward them. And so that's what I saw, and
Wow.
I was really taken away by that.
That's tremendous. Wow. And that's the power of God right there. That's the grace of God, right? It's like where the situation would make anyone bitter, upset, or angry. There's something that God gives to us, which is trust and hope, saying, wait a minute, this is not the end of the story. There is more, and God will bring good out of the tragedy in spite of what took place, right?
Amen.
Wow. You know what I really love is that you quoted from the book of Job. Do you know Job? I came across this verse one time in the book of Job, and Job says these words. He says, "Oh, that my words were written down." The author of the book of Job isn't Job, but he wished during his time that his words were written down. One day, this brother's going to get to heaven. What's going to be so surprising is when he finds out there was a book written about his life, and a book that has comforted many people. Isn't that beautiful?
So beautiful.
We have another question right over there.
I was wondering, how can people begin to act as missionaries in their local areas?
I think for one thing, I have to pray that God will help me see people the way that he sees them, the way that Jesus was always, wherever he was reaching out to those around him, the poor, the marginalized, the outcasts, people, low on the social pole, but just like asking, if you have a relationship with Jesus, just asking like, hey, how can I be your hands and feet today? Like, how can I be a blessing? It could be like an encouraging word. It could be like doing something for someone even close to you or at your school or workplace. You never know the things that people are going through. And so just being open and aware of those around you.
Andrew, before we go to you with this question, Grace, here you are. You spent years on a leper colony in China, and then you live in what state now?
Maryland.
You lived in Maryland. You live in this state, right?
Yes.
And you've gotten back into life here.
Yes.
God's still using you as a missionary here?
I hope so. Yes.
Right. What do you think are the biggest challenges of being a missionary here?
I think, one of the, a big contrast is people's pain and wounds are not on the outside here. They're mainly on the inside and are covered, and there's a lot of social norms, etc., that people are embarrassed or don't want to be real and just upfront like, hey, I have an issue, I need help, I need something else in my life. But I think we all go through that, and I believe the need is universal for Christ, for his love, for him to change us, to use us, to fill us, to be a blessing to others.
Wow, that's beautiful. How about you, Andrew?
I had a good Christian upbringing, but I wasn't looking for those opportunities for service. And I think what changed in my mind was God allowing me to go on different mission trips as a volunteer, photographer specifically. And I went to Southeast Asia 4 times in consecutive years. And seeing the need really inspired me to want to serve. It didn't happen naturally at first, but when I realized that I had something to offer, when I had something that I could help tangibly, the heart of service really became real for me. And basically the second part of that is, even if you don't have a great spiritual walk with the Lord, as long as you're willing and looking for opportunities to reach out and make a difference, God can bless that.
And you don't have to be a great preacher or sit up on a pulpit to give a sermon. God can use your gifts however they are, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. We got time for one more question. Right over there.
I was just wondering what's next for the both of you as you continue your work as missionaries.
For me, I'm in the Philippines at this point. My long-term goal is to go into an area, what they call the 1040 window. And there's a lot of unreached people groups in that area. And just bringing that hope to them is something that I'm passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you, Grace.
Right now, I've shifted from being overseas for the time being because I have a small child and one on the way. And so right now my husband and my focus is reaching people here and then actually making a difference, seeing the needs around in our community, in our local community, and then being open, of course, to going wherever God leads our family.
And Grace, when God calls us to take the gospel commission to the world, you look on a globe, United States is still on that globe, right?
Yes.
It's true.
Wonderful. Thank you again for your service. It's been really inspiring. I've been inspired in realizing that once our hearts have been touched by God's love, He gives us a deep desire to show His love to others, and that God uses service to give us joy and to bring us closer to Him. Have you been inspired to live a life of service after hearing these stories? Please follow us on Facebook at Hope at Night and share your thoughts with us there. Thank you and God bless.